Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Today we're doing the What We've Been Playing series. I believe this is episode 27. Generally, I am accompanied with my co-host Corinne, but she's a little under the weather this week, so we'll see her next time. But I'm still going to go ahead and go through with our video to give you an update on all of the games that we've been playing, some of my specific highlights, as well as my top 3 and bottom 3 of the 73 unique titles that I was able to play in the last couple of weeks. So I'm curious to hear what you think about these games, and if you have any comments or if you're watching along live, I'd love to hear what you think about them, and I'll make sure to bring them up, whether it be now in the live stream or later in the comment section below. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow. And for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. Happy New Year, and let's get started with episode 27 of the board games we've been playing. Now, this first game that I've been playing was one I was pretty excited about. It had this theme that draws me in, of course, being the Lord of the Rings. Now, this game is War of the Ring, the card game. I actually had the opportunity to play this one 3 times. I played 3 of the different scenarios that are present in the game. There is a 2-player game that is a Fellowship of the Ring where you're playing through that first book. And then there's also the epic 2-player version where you're playing with all of the cards and all of the characters from the entire trilogy. And then lastly, there is the way the game was meant to be played, and that is the 4-player mode where you have 2 players playing as evil characters, and then the other 2 players that are playing as the Fellowship, the Free Peoples. And then they are trying their best to win these different locations, whether it be the path locations that represent the journey of Frodo on his way to to Mordor, trying to destroy the ring, or you can play as the rest of the Free Peoples, protecting these different locations, these war points. So you have this different sort of scenario set up for each game, but the core of the game itself remains the same. It's a combo-driven game where you're going to be playing out cards onto these middle locations, and you're trying to match the types of symbols to the different locations. You'll have a hand of cards that has different classes, and these classes are tied to those specific locations, as well as specific items in your deck. So a lot of the time, you're just looking for matching symbols and putting them into areas where you're hopefully trying to make combos work. Now, this game features a mechanism where whenever you play a card, you have to get rid of another card in your hand. So you're constantly able to make a tactical decision of, okay, I can use this right now, and I'll cycle this card, which means put it in sort of a pseudo discard pile, because it'll get shuffled back in later. So you're always making the most out of what you have in your hand. You also, if you feel that your cards aren't useful at all, you can always just get rid of 2 of them in order to draw a new card from your deck. So that's a way to do it. It does kind of hurt a little bit because when you do that, your cards are removed permanently, but you can do it in a pinch if you want to set up. The other cool thing that helps with curbing this luck of maybe not having matching symbols is a lot of your cards you can put into what's called the reserve. It's an area in front of you. You put them down there, and then in future rounds, you can move them into the combats that are in the center of the table. So you're sort of building up and you're telegraphing what you have to the opponent, but it's also a way that you're not wasting your resources. But a lot of this game, and I think it was one of the major complaints for a lot of people playing it, was the sifting through unique cards. We had some players that felt that their cards were just extremely random because they are mostly unique, particularly for the Free Peoples. And there are some items that are very specific, that this specific sword has to go on this specific character, and you're having to sift through your entire deck to do so. I didn't find that as much of an issue because of that mechanism of when you want to play a card, you get rid of a card, but it's something that I want to let you know about. Overall, I think that the game works well. The pacing is nice as you are playing these characters one after another. You're only taking a single action on your turn, and then there are multiple battlefields that you're going to be fighting over. And the game end triggers when you have either reached 10 more points than the opponent at any given time. It's sort of an automatic win, or at the very end of the game, whoever has the most points. So each point does matter, and it's up to you to decide whether you want to put defense on certain things or let them go to reserve your characters for future scenarios. And the path mechanism is interesting, as the evil team just needs to win by at least 1, but they can do some overkill for some additional points. And then the location scoring goes automatically to the defender unless it's even attacked. So you have to actually put an effort to take over these areas. This brings me to an interesting question, though. I want to do one more thing on the locations, though. There's a lot of cards that can actually resummon locations, and I think that's awesome because you'll have these characters that will bring out specific locations, whether it be from like the upcoming deck, or you can bring back already taken over locations in order to retrieve the victory points that you've already lost. I love this sensation because you already know that your opponent has committed a bunch of these cards to that location to protect it already. So if you are able to respawn it and bring it back into the battlefield, you can feel awesome knowing that they've just already used all of these characters that were strong at that specific location. Most of the time when you are defending or attacking, those cards will be removed from the game permanently after you've used them. So you can sort of foretell what certain defenses or offensive maneuvers your opponent might be able to play. So I've played this one 3 times in those 3 different settings. Out of all of them, my favorite one had to be the 4-player mode. I love the fact that you had the different cards that would be comboing with each other. One of the coolest things was, as the Free People's player, you had one side that was using the elves and the Dunedain, and then the other side had pretty much every other race, like hobbits and dwarfs, and there were cards that I could play as an elf onto hobbit characters. So I was coordinating with my teammates saying, oh, put that there so that I can play my card on you. And that way we can get an additional bonus. And it was fun being able to cross-reference that. I didn't see that as much with the evil player, but maybe that was just from my perspective. I did play the evil player for my first 2 games, though, and felt that they had a lot of cool cycling, ways to manipulate the path. So I think there's something that is going to be interesting each time you play. And it's a game where you are welcome to discover as you play. For me, it's not something that reminds me of a thing like Twilight Struggle, where you need to know every single card in your deck beforehand to even have a chance of winning. I think you can sort of experience this game and go from it from start to finish, not really knowing all of the cards. And that's sort of a discovery aspect, and that will be just as powerful as playing it from multiple times. Obviously, there's going to be some advantages of knowing when to play cards, but I think a lot of the cards have similar effects in how they work with gaining resources or drawing cards, and because of that tactical play and not being able to use a bunch at the same time, you're going to understand the idea of saving some for later and using the ones you have now. So you're always making the best of what you got in War of the Ring, the card game. This brings me to my first question, though, and that has to do with the different modes of play. So I love the 4-player mode of War of the Ring. I think that the 2-player giant deck mode is one that I probably won't play again. You just have so many cards that's a little bit harder to actually sift and find things that you need. But the other one that I enjoyed a lot was actually the Fellowship one, where you have just the 2 decks, 2 smaller decks, and you're just playing through the Fellowship of the Ring scenario. I thought that was awesome. You still got the feel of the game. You got to learn it, and it was a smaller package, which made it for a bit more of a tight experience. I like that one quite a bit. But my question for the first game here is, what games have you encountered that have multiple scenarios or game modes that all work well? So that made me think of this War of the Ring prospect. They have the 2-player, they have the 4-player team mode. There's even a 1 versus all mode for this game. But the thing that brings me to mind, I did a whole video on this, I'm pretty sure, at some point, but one game that definitely fits this criteria has to be Bullet Heart. I've been playing this as well these last couple of weeks. We got some new promo characters in, so it was a good excuse to play more of it. But Bullet Heart offers a solo mode, a competitive mode, and a cooperative mode, and they all work phenomenally. They're easy to pick up and play, and I love it when a game offers things like that and they follow through in the success of those different game modes. So that's my answer to this question. What games have multiple scenarios or game modes that all work well? That's Bullet Heart, and I'm curious to hear what you think. I'll make sure to put the question in the comments below so that you can answer it, but I'm curious to hear what you think about this first question. So that's our first game. That is War of the Ring, the card game. And the next game was one that I was pretty dang excited to try, based on the company that it's coming from. This is Delicious Games, and the designers, the co-designer, Vladimir Suhi. This is Woodcraft. Now, Woodcraft is a game that surprisingly works really well in the solo capacity, and I haven't actually played it in the multiplayer because I just played it for the first time yesterday. But I wanted to highlight it here because it did something amazing to me, and it made contract fulfillment and dice manipulation super exciting for me. A lot of times those mechanisms sort of go by the wayside. They're not something I'm super engaged or interested in, but Woodcraft does some amazing things with the theming actually that tie in to this manipulation and contract fulfillment. So the game has you playing as the owner of this wood crafting company. You're going to be taking actions to collect dice, and then you're using those dice to fulfill contracts. But here is where the game gets interesting. On your turn, you're only able to take a single action, and you have this awesome action wheel mechanism that's going to be pushing you towards completing the game. So you'll have to pick one of your actions, and based on the one you take, you get additional bonuses wherever it happens to be on this wheel. And then you'll slide it to the next quadrant, and then you'll resolve any bonus actions. It honestly feels a little bit like a choose your own adventure puzzle every turn because there's so many different avenues that you can take, and that's going to affect the actions. So I feel like maybe there might be a bit of AP in the multiplayer, but I do think it makes for a perfect solo game. But in this one in particular, you are trying to complete contracts, and these contracts have dice requirements and sometimes additional resources. But for the majority, it's just dice of specific colors, specific values, and sometimes a whole bunch of different dice. But when you complete one of these contracts, it feels so gratifying because the rewards are so important. They are currency for upgrading your shop. They are these end game scoring potential bonuses, ways to get additional incomes during the income phases. So you want to be pushing towards this. But the fun part is how you're able to customize the dice in order to reach this point. Every time you take a turn, most of your actions are going to be getting dice or manipulating your dice. But you're also going to have your own little house that has little machines in it that you'll be able to trigger to do dice manipulation. And as I said before, this ties into the theming because when you take a action to manipulate a die, it'll have to do with exactly what you think. Cutting the die in half, and now it becomes 2 dice. Using glue to stick 2 different dice together. Putting some extra pieces of wood on it to make it just a little bit bigger. You can even plant your seeds, have them grow, and then chop them down when you're ready to actually use them in your equipment. So there's a variety of ways that you're able to craft these different items, customize your dice, and it's up to you to invest in the abilities to do that. I love this so much. You have the different forms of dice manipulation that's actually paired with investing in those forms of dice manipulation. So there's all these different avenues and facets that you're going to be thinking about and thinking about putting that time and effort into completing. So far, I'm super impressed with this one. As mentioned before, I just learned this yesterday playing it for the first time solo, and the solo mode is awesome. It's so easy to run. You just have this deck of 12 cards. You'll be flipping the top card, moving a couple of the action discs, and then it's going to gobble up some of your endgame scoring conditions. But you still get to retain that feeling of this puzzle in front of you. You've got all these assistants that can help you. I do think that the art is a little creepy at times, but I love the customization to a T. It reminds me a lot of something like Maracaibo, where there's a blank board in front of you at the start of the game and so many different little options on ways that you can customize. And I think one playthrough is going to give you an idea of what sort of special abilities and features you want to invest in future plays. And you just sort of figure out your way and explore it during your first game. But I'm pretty impressed with Woodcraft. I think this is one of the best ones that I played in these last couple of days, and I'm excited to play more of it. So that is Woodcraft. And that brings me to my last game that I want to feature here, and that is Nemesis Lockdown. Nemesis Miss was this past month and had a blast with it. It's when a group of my buds and I all get together and we try our hand at winning Nemesis. Now, this year we played Lockdown. No one in our entire group has won Nemesis Lockdown in years, in the year that it's been out. And so we were trying our best to complete it this time. So Nemesis Lockdown is a redo of the original Nemesis, but it adds a variety of small little modules that are integrated into the game design. It definitely feels more like an expansion to me than a standalone game, but it does have all the components required for that standalone experience. Now, the thing that makes it the most unique, though, has to be the characters. The characters in this one are super strong. You have all of these unique cards that are unique to each character that allow you to do some pretty amazing things. Lots of disruption, interaction, and I think that ramps up that interaction and cooperation as well as coordination between the different players. This is an experience where if you are able to be cooperative with the different players at the table, you're going to do pretty well at the entire experience. And I think that's something you need to be aware of, because the first time we played this, we thought that it was so punishing, it was almost impossible to make any progress or headway because it just was so terrifying. Every time you encountered an alien, it had the opportunity to follow you into different corridors. Every time a power shutdown happened, you just lost power, and it was so hard to aim and shoot, and all these bad things were happening. If you buckle down and cooperate, the game suddenly becomes a lot more manageable. And there are actually cards in the decks of the different characters that can encourage everybody to work together. There's even a sentry character, the blue one, who's able to punish the other players if they're standing out of line. I remember the one time I was playing there, I had an objective that I chose where I needed to eliminate a specific player. And my wife Ariana was following me as the sentry. And the sentry has abilities where they can stun you, they can make you lose an action, they can interrupt your cards. And she was just following me all game. Basically, my warden being like, "Oh, don't mess with this person. I see what you're trying to do," and just tased me into cooperation. So eventually I had to sneak away and make a break for it. And it was a lot of fun having to mitigate that disaster of being policed by the other players. It was pretty cool. And so your deception and your traitorness, you have to hide as much as possible. But this game of Nemesis Lockdown, we finally got our first two wins. Me and my friend Regan, we both were able to sneak a win. I was able to win with the janitor. I was able to make one of these Enviro suits, and we were able to send the signal. We deduced that it was potentially this specific endgame condition that we had to satisfy, and I made it out of the base before it exploded, and I was able to satisfy my condition of making sure that the base exploded. And her condition was that she needed to have one other player alive, and so luckily we were able to work together and escape together, and it was beautiful. I was so happy. It was insane. This was a full player count game, and it barely made it to the end still, even with that full cooperation. So that brings us to my question for this game is, what games have you barely snuck a win in? And this game of Nemesis, it definitely felt that finally I got it. I don't know how it happened. I barely did it in the last turn, was able to escape before the thing exploded. But there are other games, I'm sure, that you get that play experience in and you're feeling, oh my goodness, yes, finally I'm able to win this game that I've tried so hard at. Now, for me, a lot of the times, games that are feature heavily in luck, things with a lot of dice and maybe drafting, specific order and timing of things, it's those games that I get pretty lucky in. But one game that recently I got a lot of luck in, and I should not have won, but did anyway, was Sagrada. We were playing the new expansion for Sagrada Glory, and in this one, you are trying to hope that certain dice show up in certain rounds because you have some endgame scoring conditions that tie to specific colors of dice, as well as these different placement restrictions on your board. So you might even need specific numbers as well as specific colors because you can't put them in the correct areas. Now, when I was playing, it was the very last turn of the game. I needed two specific dice. There was a red 3 that I needed and then like a red 5. And lo and behold, the very last turn of the game, I was second to pick. So there were a lot of opportunities for these dice to disappear. 5 red dice got pulled in the final draft pool. They were rolled exactly the numbers that I needed. Nobody else took them, and I was able to snag them and score like 40 points out of it. I had the objective that was tied to red dice, so I got extra points for those. And then there were also some specific configurations with the Glory expansion where you needed to have specific patterns of repeated colors, and I was able to satisfy those as well. So I didn't get negative points and got the positive instead. Oh, I felt like I cheesed them so much. I robbed that victory from everybody else at the table. Well, so that was Sagrada Glory. I'm curious to hear what you think. What's a game that you recently have barely snuck a win in? So that's it. Those are the 3 games that I wanted to talk about today, but I'm going to run quickly through the entire list of all of the different games here. So there are a total of 73 unique titles that I played in the last couple of weeks, and I'll run through them now. We have Wayfarers of the South Tigris, Dune Imperium, Clever Forever, Bullet Heart, Spyfall, Rumble in the Dungeon, Great Western Trail Argentina, Skulls of Sedlec, Cloudspire, Ascension Tactics, the deck building miniatures game, Unmatched Battle of Legends, One Deck Galaxy, Arkham Horror the card game, Sticky Cthulhu, On Tour New York, QE, Acropolis, Hanami Koji, Geisha's Road, Sheriff of Nottingham, Magic Maze, Ginkopolis, Tidal Blades, Frostpunk the board game, Encyclopedia, Caverna, Smitten, Exit Advent Calendar, Puzzle Strike, Teletum, Viticulture World, Spicy, Foundations of Rome, Dungeon Pets, Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, Pictures, Mythic Mischief, Nemesis Lockdown, Heat, Coup, Crokinole, Shark, Paperback Adventures, 25 Words or Less, Marvel Champions, Twilight Inscription, Hounds of Teutonica, Challengers, Fishing Lessons, Wild Tales, A Pirate Legacy, Planet Unknown, Ticket to Ride Europe, Werewords, Ink and Gold, Spire's End, Wits and Wagers, It's Vegas Baby, Skull King, War of the Ring the card game, Hoplomachus Victorum, Woodcraft, Ragemore, Green Team Wins, Blood on the Clocktower, Flamecraft, Trekking Through History, Strike, Harry Potter Strike, Maskmen, Sagrada, Splitter, Seven Wonders, and Paleo. So those are all of the different titles that we played in the last couple of weeks. And I'm going to quickly go through my top three and my bottom three. So for my top three, Blood on the Clocktower for sure. We had a couple of big group experiences, particularly during New Year's, as well as just our like December sort of Christmas party style of thing. But the game that I got to run was actually an atheist game where the players are against the storyteller. And this was so much fun as I was trying to craft an experience that simulated that there was still evil in the game and gave everybody some uncertainty because it felt that everybody was lying. What an awesome character. The atheist makes it so that the storyteller is the evil and everybody in the town has to figure this out. And if they guess wrong, then the good team can automatically lose. So I love that balance and what an awesome character. So that was Blood on the Clocktower. My second highlight had to be Paperback Adventures. I played a lot of this over the holiday break in the early mornings, got a lot of solo plays in, and I was able to dive into the different modules, the purple cards. And these change different restrictions and portions of the game, making it so that your hand size is smaller. It changes the enemy Val cards. And I played all of these, and it was so much fun combining them with the different characters. I think after all of this now, I can safely say that my favorite character in the entire game is the damsel. I think she's the most interesting and most fun because you can just set up these gigantic combo turns. You can get invincibility, and she has this cool, unique function on her cards where you can use them for letters or discard them for immediate bonuses, which means that you can use that to like activate your items, but also make these gigantic words if you need to. I love her. She's the best character. That's the damsel. And then the last game that actually snuck in that top three was QE Commodities. The expansion for QE rocked my world. I thought it was so good as you were able to fix the core game. Awesome. This made it so that I'm excited to play QE again. Before I was trying to get rid of it because I just hated the entire experience. But the addition of additional resources and points for second place means that there's actually a game now. It's not just going to be one person hiking the prices and then sort of having to cave into that experience. Now there's a secondary game going on, and you cannot win by just being that person who hikes that initial price up. There are more ways to score victory points than just getting first place on each auction, and that is perfect. That is what QE needed. And it's so easy to include. I was really surprised that it takes away some of the complexity and then replaces it with something of similar complexity. Awesome. So the QE expansion, the Commodities expansion, I recommend this one. So those were my top three games that I played in these last couple of weeks. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is actually a special one because this was an amazing experience and then also a terrible experience. This was Sticky Cthulhu. So I was recommended this from my friend Tia over at Takaijo, and she said that this was a super goofy game that's a lot of fun, and the stickiness of these little hands made it so that you want to try this. And the game itself has you throwing these little tentacles, and they're sticky hands basically onto cards and trying to collect them. The first time I played this was an absolute joy. It was so much fun. Everything worked perfectly. We were throwing it on the table, having a lot of laughs. Amazing time. But right after that, the second time we played, the sticky hands were not sticking on anything. It was a disaster. It's honestly like it was an unplayable game the second time that we played it because the stickiness of all of the hands had just completely disappeared. And that was pretty frustrating because I was like, oh man, I just had a bunch of fun with this. And that was so annoying. Now, I was talking to Ariana and she was telling me that you can solve this problem by washing them afterwards, the sticky hands. I don't know if I'm in the mood to wash my board games. It's the same thing with like that. If you've played that game where you put like the mouth guards in your mouth and you have to say words, you have to wash those after each time you play that. And not something I'm super interested in. Washing dishes is my least favorite thing. It's up there with like, no, I think that's probably my least favorite household chore, if we're being real. So having to do that to a board game, it's just something I'm not interested in. And if you have to do that for Sticky Cthulhu, I think I probably won't play this one again. Kind of awkward. Like, oh, don't worry, it's the sticky hands are getting washed. It's that cycle right now. Not in the mood. So that was Sticky Cthulhu. The next games I'm going to talk about now are the bottom three. So first one I was excited to try because there was actually a sequel to it. There's Puzzle Strike 2 that just came out. So I had an opportunity to play the original Puzzle Strike. Now, in Puzzle Strike, it's a riff on the classic Dominion deck building style, but instead of a deck, you have a bag of chips. So I played the original version. I think it was maybe the second edition, but it was this classic looking one here. And the game is exactly that. It's Dominion with a additional bag building element. And honestly, it just made the game a bit more clunky to me. I would rather have this in the deck building format. And I thought that the deck building and the victory condition in Dominion is way more clean and straightforward. In Puzzle Strike, the way that you end the game is by getting these specific pieces, and they're allowed to shoot your victory points to the opponent, and you're trying to get 10 of those victory points into your opponent's like damage area. And so the game ended up being a still deck building style game with the classic ropes where you're getting actions and extra plays and trying to combo. So nothing super new or innovative, but it also was super long and drug out because you had to wait till you got those specific items that would shoot those puzzle over, and each player's doing that. So it's just kind of going back and forth. And it sort of felt like I was just turning my wheels, no real progress being made. So that's Puzzle Strike, a pretty big disappointment, but hey, now I don't got to try out Puzzle Strike 2. Maybe they've made some improvements in the next one. The next bottom game had to be actually Magic Maze, and it was this playthrough in particular. I have some awesome moments with Magic Maze, but this one in particular fell extremely flat. You had it's a group cooperative game where everybody is silently moving pieces on this puzzle, and you cannot communicate as you do this. And so a lot of the game is waiting for people to make moves, and that means that as you play, you have to be super aware of what's going on. You have this map, and you'll have a tile that tells you where you're allowed to go, and so you'll be able to move any piece in that direction, and sometimes you might be able to get like a special ability, and that gives you an additional job on top of that. Now, this game I played with 3 players, and we just sort of sat there because there were moments where people just didn't know what to do. They didn't realize that they needed to move certain things, and it sort of soured the entire experience, and it was just kind of like a do-nothing game. Now, this could be solved by potentially house ruling it and being able to speak and pointing things out. They give you a piece in the game where you can place it in front of people to say, hey, you need to do something, but that's sort of the entire game. You should always be doing something, so I think the piece is a little bit irrelevant, as it just adds to like the pressure on you that like, oh, I really am messing up. It's my fault. But you're always constantly analyzing this. And because the game you cannot communicate, you have this weird position where you don't really want to help people because that would be breaking the rules of the game. And so when you finally lose, you'll be like, okay, let's try it again. This is how you play. This is the sort of things where we're doing wrong and right. And then you restart the game, and then it sort of happens again. It was a really bad play of Magic Maze, and it makes me a little afraid to bring this one out again with different groups, because you could have that experience where this is a game where very much the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. If you have one person that's not in it, it's going to affect the entire experience. So that's Magic Maze. It puts me in that weird situation with cooperative games. When I teach cooperative games, I don't like helping at all. I'd rather everybody just fail and then immediately understand what's going on through experiential learning than me sort of quarterbacking and telling people what to do. But in this one, it's sort of like you have to just do it. And that's such a hard place to be with a cooperative experience. So that was another game that was on the bottom of my experience list. That was Magic Maze. Now, the last game is another one that was actually getting a reprint, so I was pretty excited to try it. And this is Shark. So Shark here is a very old game where you are going to be rolling dice, and that dice is going to determine where you're able to place one of these buildings. And after each turn, you're able to buy stocks in different companies and sort of like acquire the more of that tile there are, the more value that those stocks are going to get. But you're only able to buy at the start or the end of your turn, and then you can get payouts based on if you're expanding your companies. Now, I was excited to try this game because there is a reprint of it coming very soon. And so, yes, if it's great, I can go get this new version, and it's going to be wonderful. However, I was severely disappointed with this one, and it was apparent from turn 1. So the game has the first player with the opportunity to roll, increase a company, and then buy stock in a company. And then they're able to immediately purchase stock, and then every time that stock gets rolled, they're able to get money. Now, if you're first, this means that you are, right from the get-go, getting more cash than every single player, and then you are able to accumulate that cash every single turn for the whole game. And there's really no catch-up mechanism in this, as the game's driven through connecting these different areas. And every time an area increases, it just benefits the people who own the stock in that company. And once you join a company with stock, it's going to get even more valuable for you, and it's just going to grow and grow and grow. There's not a lot of incentive in order to tank your own stock or invest in another company if you're doing super well. Now, there are ways that companies can destroy or overtake over other companies, and that's if they touch and one is bigger than the other. But since that first player is dictating where these pieces are going and they're getting the initial investment, they have the flexibility to invest in multiple companies to gain different sorts of cash. And then with all of these options, it honestly really doesn't matter that much if they're able to go down in that cash value. And this is just that for those first couple of players. If we were playing a 5-player game of this, so the 4th and 5th player honestly do not have a lot of choices in what they're able to invest in because the price of these different pieces fluctuates and they're not able to accrue as much money as quickly. We actually had one of our players get kicked out of the game in the third turn because they just didn't have the money because they invested in one company, and then the other players just forced that person to get their to crash their stocks. So they had to get rid of their stocks and pay the dividends, and they didn't have the money because they only had recently acquired those stocks. There was no way that they were actually able to continue in the game. I myself was in the game, but I was pseudo eliminated basically because I was the fifth player. And so I had the very last action on the round, and I invested in the company that I could afford. And it was the only company that I could afford. And every turn I would roll my dice and hope that I invested in my company. It's a 1 in 6 chance. So I didn't really have that much opportunity to do so. And I just sort of was there, not really engaging, not really playing in the game. I feel like the game has a lot of its moves telegraphed, particularly if you're winning, and even telegraphed if you're losing, because there's only one way to actually win, and that's by destroying the company that the winning player has already. But at that point, it doesn't really matter because they've made so much passive money off of the different tracks that they've been increasing on. And so even if you destroyed their company, yes, they'd have to pay back whatever stocks they're losing, but they've made so much money and they've been able to make so many plays that it doesn't really matter. And they've had this money so they can invest that money into the other stocks. I didn't like this game at all. It was pretty unfortunate. The game is random when it comes to the dice rolls, but even on the choices that you do have, it's pretty telegraphed what you're actually going to do. So that shark, I don't know why this is getting reprinted, because you can tell it's a very dated design and it's not one I enjoyed at all. So yeah, I think it's a 3 or a 2 for me. Yeah, 3 or 2? Yeah, it's a 3 for me. It's a 3 because, yes, I think that it doesn't defy the description. It definitely has those different aspects, but it's not one that I'm going to ever ask to play again, and I actively don't like playing it. But those are the games. Those are my top 3 and bottom 3, and all the games that we've been playing. Once again, I'll put the questions that we've been talking about. What games have those multiple scenarios or game modes that all work well? And what games have you barely snuck a win in? What sort of things have you been playing these last couple of weeks? I'm curious to hear what you got. Now, first off, I do want to end this video with some of the upcoming games that I'm excited to play. We have Stellarion, a solo-only game from the Oniverse. That one was recommended to me by a viewer, and I hope it definitely pans out. We also have Aeon's Trespass Odyssey. I finally got the whole thing sleeved and organized. The box is still very much damaged, and I talked to Into the Unknown Studios, and they told me that they have to get this form from FedEx, and it takes about 30 days to do so. And then once that happens, then we can submit the missing parts request. So there's a big process here to get a non-damaged version of the game. So I'll eventually put it on the channel when it's done. And then lastly, the thing I'm excited to play is Nidavellir Eatable. So this is the new expansion for Nidavellir, and I was running through it and I heard some negative things about it, but the expansion looks pretty dang good and easy to integrate. It's just a deck of cards that you shuffle, so you don't have to add it to any of the other decks, and you just place it on top of the 2 tavern. And then when you go, you just draw from there instead, and then you talk about the special abilities when they appear. This sounds like such an easy to implement expansion. I'm excited to try it. So that's a Nidavellir Eatable. I've also been playing some games of Hoplomachus Victorum, been having fun with that, getting back into Hoplomachus, and that's been fun. And then hopefully putting out some new content around some Button Shy Games. Potentially we're now part of that list to receive different emails from them, and so hopefully able to put some of those products out later. So lots of new games coming in still, and playing lots of expansions, as you can see here, and these huge story games have also arrived. Oh, the other game I'm excited for is Warp's Edge Anomaly. So that just came in last night and got it all organized, ready to go, so hopefully get to play some after this. But that's it. Those are all the games that we've been playing. I'm curious to hear what you think. What have you been playing? What do you think about the games that I talked about here? Do you agree with my opinions? Do you not? What games should I be checking out and putting on these lists in future videos? But thank you so much for watching. SideGame Strong,